Hey friends, and welcome back to our book club, Love and Responsibility, as we delve into the teaching of Pope St. John Paul II, as we study the book, Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love by Dr. Edward Sri. I hope that your discussions last week were very good, very fruitful. I hope you met. Guys, we can't be jumping off the bandwagon here. We got to keep going. You got to persevere. I also hope that you had some time to sit down, context of personal prayer, and to begin to reflect and incorporate these things into your life, so that you can begin to live more fruitful, life-giving, Christ-centered relationships. Once again, this is meant to be very practical. Today we study chapter 7, which is a chapter on chastity. And this book dedicates 2 chapters to the study of chastity. This chapter, chapter 7, is more theoretical, or maybe it's helping us understand, well, what is chastity? And why is it important? The next chapter is going to help us live it practically, as chapter 8 is entitled The Battle for Purity. So how do we battle to be chaste? Today, chapter 7 begins by talking about virtue. And once again, virtue in general is a good habit. Virtues are good habits that are acquired through practice and repetition, little by little. Vice is bad habits. So vice, bad habits that we also acquire little by little, one step at a time through repetitive actions. So virtue, good habits. And in general, chapter 7 says that virtue, good habits, these are resented by many people. Why? Because it's hard to be virtuous. It's hard to develop good habits. Because of our fallen nature, we just have this inclination to kind of take the path of least resistance. It's easy to give in to our passions, to our appetites, to the easy way. It's much more difficult to live the way we ought to live, which is the way of virtue. It is much easier to give in to our emotions and desires than to control them, says Dr. Sri. Moral laziness is a real problem. So just take a couple of examples. Let's take our natural appetite or desire, passion of hunger. It's very easy to give in to this appetite. I talk to lots of people, especially in this time of pandemic. They're at home. It's much easier to just grab for the snack or whatever you had, to be munching all day, which is not the healthiest, than it is to say, no, look, I'm not going to eat that snack. I'm going to let that be. I'm just going to eat at my meals, etc. So a lot of people are struggling with this. Another appetite or passion, just on the natural level, is that of anger, and how easy it is for us to lose our temper and to give in to unhealthy expressions of anger. Once again, this is a problem in this time of pandemic. We're all cooped up together, and it's easy to lose our temper. Much more difficult to say, no, take a deep breath, not let your anger get the best of you. So, because it's hard to live virtue, because it's hard to say no to our passions, lots of people try to tear down virtue. Lots of people try to, well, if I can't live it, then I'm going to tear it down so I don't have to feel guilty when I fail. So a couple of examples, the Christian woman at work who doesn't want to give in to the office gossip, she decides not to participate. Well, what happens to that woman? Well, usually she's going to be made fun of. She's going to be ridiculed for being a holy roller because she won't participate in what is obviously so true about, talking about this or that person, etc. Right? So not good. So people trying to tear down virtue or the high standards of moral living that we ought to live. Another example would be just someone of faith, someone who takes the faith seriously and tries to live it in general. These people are oftentimes labeled as fundamentalists or extremists. Just think of the recent Supreme Court nominee, Amy Barrett. She's being, they have no real reasons to tear her down, so now they're trying to target her faith. She's an extremist. She's part of People of Praise. Oh no, this has got to be the worst thing ever, right? She has a huge family. Oh no. Anyway, you kind of see this dynamic, right? If we can't live it, if it's too hard, then we're going to tear it down so we don't have to feel guilty when we fail. John Paul II says, many people devalue the virtues so as to excuse themselves from having to live by higher moral standards. We can point and see this reality, around us, but it's also true in our own hearts. When the going gets rough, we tend to want to make excuses for ourselves. We want to tear down the standards to which we're trying to live, simply because we don't want to have to put in the effort. Now, chastity is a virtue. It's a good habit. And it's one that Dr. Sri says is probably the most ridiculed in our society today. But first, what is chastity? Chastity is the motive that liberates love from utilitarian attitudes. Dr. Sri writes, chastity helps purify our hearts of selfish desires and makes selfless, mature love between two persons possible. So what we're going to see is that chastity is a virtue that's going to protect us from using our sexual urges to justify the objectification of other people. That means it's going to protect me from using someone else as a sexual object as I just respond to the sexual, physical gratification that I experience or the emotional attraction that I experience in relation to a member of the opposite sex. So people revolt against the virtue of chastity, and they'll say, it's psychologically unhealthy. Right? We have these sexual urges, and it's good to just let them be, to experience them, to try to control them. Well, this is psychologically unhealthy because it goes against our nature. Or they'll say that, well, chastity is really an enemy of love. If two people are in love, then they should be able to express that love in whatever way they want, especially in sexual ways. So how dare you try to control that love through a good virtue, a good habit like chastity? Once again, it's a difficult virtue to live, and so we have a tendency to tear it down and justify our tearing it down in a variety of ways. If you turn to the media and culture, or like movies and television, you'll find that the chaste one is oftentimes portrayed as kind of a loser, kind of a goofball. This person is just kind of a prude, kind of stingy, rigid, not interested. Anyway, not the kind of person we would want to be. Not a fun, exciting, energetic type of person. No, it's the prude. Once again, it's portrayed in a negative light. That's the purpose. So modernity has trouble understanding chastity because it tends to understand love in terms of sensual and sentimental attraction. Once again, this goes back to the sexual urge. Physical attraction, emotional attraction. This is what love is all about. Instead of seeing love as something deeper and more profound. Once again, the objective dimension of love, which entails self-sacrifice, self-giving. It entails taking responsibility for the true good of this other person who's in front of me. This is what we spoke about last week in chapter 6. So it's not to say that physical attraction is bad. It's not to say that emotional attraction is bad. God put these things there. But ultimately, they need to be ordered towards the good of the person who actually exhibits these attributes, who's physically good looking, or has this, masculinity or femininity that's integrated and mature and really attractive. So it's this objective dimension that we need to value and put in prime of place, because it's the objective dimension of love, mutual self-giving, responsibility for the good of the other. This is what true, enduring, deep love is all about. The virtue of chastity comes into play because it's the superficial dimensions, or the subjective level, the physical attraction, the emotions. This is most readily apparent, and it's easy for us to give into these things right away. But chastity says, wait, no, slow down. We need to control these appetites, the sexual urge, so that we can learn to love the other in the objective way, through commitment, through sacrifice for the good of the other. This is something that's not easy to do. It takes time to be able to get to this level, right? The level of commitment, the level of mutual self-giving. So chastity allows us to control what is readily apparent. I'm physically attracted to this person. I'm emotionally attracted to this person. It allows us to control that so that we can learn to really love in an objective way. So that's why Dr. Sri, towards the end of the chapter, says, chastity is the guardian of love. Chastity is what makes love possible. It protects love from falling into selfish and utilitarian attitudes. So, once again, we don't want to judge people who tend to fall into sins of the flesh. I mean, many times they have good intentions. They do care to a certain degree about the beloved, but we live in a culture that just encourages them to give in, to give in, to give in. And sadly, it's going to ultimately lead to disaster, messiness, superficial love. And so we don't want to just be totally quick to judge them. In many ways, it's not always their fault. Sometimes it is. we want to instead be encouraging of others to really live this virtue of chastity. And if we're going to do that, if we're going to encourage others to do that, we need to first begin to live it for ourselves. So if you want deep and enduring love, you have to have self-control. You have to learn this virtue of chastity. Next week, we're going to kind of look more, well, how do we do that? So how do I actually grow in controlling my physical attraction or the attraction to the masculinity or the emotional level attractions as well? John Paul II explains that without chastity, men and women cannot selflessly love the beloved as a person because the heart is so preoccupied with emotional and sensual pleasure. So may God bless you as you delve into these topics, have some great discussions. Let's go to Mother Mary and ask her to pray for us in this month of October, this month of the Rosary, this Marian month, that we can have control over the gift of the sexual urge which God has placed in our hearts so that we can truly enter into deeper levels of love.